Before you say yes, tune into your body. So if you feel anything other than a hell yes, pause before you proceed.
Before you say yes, I would say to people, stop and think about what you want, what it is that you deserve, and make sure that you're protected.
I'm Catherine Fitzpatrick, former senior bank executive, now working with companies, governments and regulators around the world to change the way financial products are designed. This podcast is about financial consent, what to check, what to ask before you share your money, your accounts and your digital life with someone you love. So before you say yes to moving in together, listen to this. Moving in with someone is one of life's big moments. And in the middle of the boxes, the keys and the IKEA runs is someone making decisions about electricity, internet and water. It feels like boring admin because it is, and especially when you're newly in love and have a house to set up. Simone Weston will tell you they're the first moves on the chessboard. The executive leader, keynote speaker and women's advocate has survived domestic violence and financial abuse. And she'll change the way you think about an electricity account.
So I absolutely knew I was going to be comfortable sharing resources. I knew I was always going to have my own job and earn my own money. And I knew that I was going to put safeguards in place. So if I bring that to life a little bit, I was so blessed, Catherine. Like, I had the most beautiful role modelling with my parents. They were a couple who were together for 40 years until my dad passed away, and they were a team. And so they had this shared goal and this shared vision of what they wanted for their lives, and they shared money to get there. So mum did all the expenses, like she was so diligent, nothing got through her. And then dad did all the long-term financial planning, but they consulted each other on everything. Mum had her own successful business, but dad ended up being the provider. Mum worked part-time and did the family stuff. They both, from an effort perspective, contributed equally, but financially dad earned more. And I saw that and I was so, I just thought that's how you have a successful relationship. And I unconsciously subscribed to that as this is what I want for my life. So that's why I was like, well, you can share resources because you're a team, right? And so naive. And then the second thing was I had watched my mum and my auntie, their friendships groups. They'd been married to some very powerful and successful men. And I watched some of those men behave pretty badly. And the women had not worked. They were the homemakers. And they were later in life and they were making decisions. Do I stay and tolerate some of this bad behaviour because I've never had a career and I don't know how to start out again? And some of them did. And then others had these lives of financial abundance where they lost everything, had to start new careers. And I was like, that is not for me. I am always going to earn my own money. I'm never going to rely on someone else. And then the third point was around the safeguards. So then I was like, when it comes to banking, I'm going to make sure everything's dual signatories, visibility, transparency, kind of. So that was kind of the extent of the thinking that went into it.
But that's pretty comprehensive, and how amazing that you came from that kind of background, that you had your eyes open. This is the way I think it's going to work and how I'd like it to work. A lot of people kind of just fall into it as well and don't necessarily think about whose name's going to be on what bill. But you were very deliberate and very conscious about, I'm going to have my own financial independence but also share.
Yeah.
And have an open and transparent approach. That's kind of how you thought about it?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who set up the things like the phone plan or the internet and the electricity and...
So this was all the stuff I didn't think about. So
right.
I thought about the banking.
Yeah.
I was like, I've got to protect the money.
Yeah.
That was the extent of it. So with my phone, I had that from a teenager, so that stayed in my name initially. Everything else was like life admin, ill. And anyone who wanted to take care of it was like, you're a saint. I did at the time want to have my name on the accounts. And I remember at the time being really miffed. I think it was a utility company that would only take primary account holders. And he said to me at the time, he had agreed that he was going to pay all our bills out of our shared accounts, administer them. And he's like, I'm going to be paying all the bills. Like, it makes sense if my name's on it. And I was like, okay, great. That was the extent of the thinking that went into it.
Yeah. And so what did that mean for you later?
Later, well, I ended up losing a whole lot of control because I didn't realise those small decisions that I had been making actually really mattered, and they were actual structural decisions. And it wasn't until I wanted to leave that I really started to notice that he had set up his whole life, our whole life, so that he had complete power and control, and I hadn't noticed it at the time. And so when I went to leave, I realised our financial advisors were his mates, so I couldn't talk to them. He had all our documents locked in a safe at his work, so I couldn't access them. He'd managed to move my phone, and he had all of his names on all the accounts, and so he had structural power over my whole life.
And that must have been really hard to disentangle and to try and wade your way through.
It was incredibly difficult, and I think this is the thing that perhaps some people don't realise. It is the who wants to deal with this kind of stuff, right? As you were saying about creating a podcast, how to get people to buy into it. But it's the stuff that gives someone so much power, and unlocking yourself from it can be really hard. And one of the things that's really important to understand, economic abuse has such a long tail. And so you can get locked in these systems, leave this person and still be connected into them. And so in my instance, I had left, I was paying for a new life, and 6 months later, I was still paying for things in my old life.
Yeah, right. So
yeah.
That's a really long tail. One experience you had really stayed with me, and about when you got a new phone.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Totally. So towards the end of it was at a point in the relationship where he was not being a very kind human. And so I wasn't used to having a lot of kindness from him. And this day he said to me, my phone had a crack on it, and he's like, let's go get you a new phone. And so I thought it was this big romantic gesture, so silly. And we went to the shop, I picked out the phone, and he said, go keep having a look around. I'll just pay for it. Probably makes sense if I just put it on the one account. I didn't think anything of it. And then as we went to leave the shop, literally he went from being nice back to being cold instantly. And he said, I now have control of your phone and everything on it. And it's one of those, oof.
Yeah, got goosebumps.
And at the time, he was a very intelligent, strategic power player. And so he was usually a few steps ahead of me. What I hadn't realised, it might seem insignificant, okay, so he now has control, I have use of it, nothing really changes. But it was only down the track when I left and I decided to go to the police. We were working secretly he'd done some terrible things and they really wanted him put away, and I needed evidence on my phone. And so I went into it naively. I mean, you might know this with your work, but I went into it naively, calling them, thinking, okay, so there was a period of time where he is the account holder, so I can't access my records from that period. But I thought the period prior, which had been my phone since a teenager, I thought all those records were mine. And so when I rang up to get the evidence, the telco was just telco was so difficult to deal with. I ended up terminating the call, and I gave it a period of time before I tried again.
I wondered, we are talking about, pretty heavy topics and sort of the worst things that can happen in a relationship. For someone who is listening who's maybe just moved in with a partner or who's just starting to think about sharing money or bills, what are the kinds of things they might not have thought about yet that you would say, and maybe it's with a bit of hindsight as well, how might you set yourself up so that, you don't necessarily have to expect the worst, but these are the things that might protect you just in case something happens?
Yeah. My advice would be have a think about, how did you grow up? What did you see? what is your conditioning? What are you thinking a great relationship is going to be and how this is all going to be managed? Because I kind of brought that model in, but I didn't fully know that's what I was just thinking is the model of the world. And he came in with a very different model, right? And so he had been burnt in the past, and I knew that. But I didn't realize the extent of how burnt he was and how that was going to shape his behaviours. So whilst thank you for saying I was eyes wide open going into it, I was probably eyes half shut because I had that 40-year model of what a great relationship looks like. Individual bank accounts, if you earn an income, having it put straight into your bank account first. You can transfer it onto mortgages, but it always gives it you. And then it means if you need to leave, at least you have whatever your salary is going in as an exit path. Having your phone in your own name. Like, I know there's benefits in bundling. I get that, but that's your phone. That's your exit. Once a person has control over your records, particularly if they're not a particularly nice person, it can be really problematic. And yeah, so they're kind of some of my...
Yeah, really, really great tips. And I think that first part about being aware of what's your own money story, I suppose, when you're coming in. That's a nice way of saying it. Yeah. Thank you to one of the other guests who used that language. Yes, what is your money story? We've also been talking about consent and consent in sexual relationships, and younger people these days are having a much more open conversation, and they're learning about what is consent, how do you ask for it? How do you give it? We don't have the same conversations around money and bills, and how do we negotiate that as well? Because I think that can help you unpick some of that. What is that money story? What did I expect, and how are we going to do this too? Which is why I'm doing the podcast, and really grateful to guests like you for coming on to have these conversations. So if you think about all the things that you've talked about around when it comes to independence and choice and those options and consent, I suppose, if you were going to give someone advice after listening to this episode, what would you say to them?
So this isn't about expecting the worst in a relationship. It's actually the opposite of that. I am very big on life by design. Have you heard that concept before?
Well, I talk about safety by design.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, life by design, not by default. And so I think some of what I've learned is like I was unconsciously just going through life a little bit, running the patterns of what I thought success looked like based on society's conditioning. And so now I'm really big on helping people think about, well, what's the life I want to design for myself? And if I'm designing it, what are all the things I need to think about? And so when you think about being single, you have independence, choice and options. And so it's designing your life that you can continue to have independence, choice and options later. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. And then being quite deliberate about it.
Yes.
In terms of everything that you do, from the choice of partner, your choice of career, making sure you do exercise so you continue to have the independence when you're older.
Totally.
And then coming into those money choices as well. Sue Fraser has spent more than 30 years as a financial counsellor. She has sat across from people when the emotional realities of relationships collide with the fine print. And she'll tell you most of them didn't see it coming, not because they weren't paying attention, but because nobody told them what they'd actually agreed to.
I think one of the things that we often forget about is to be realistic at the very beginning of a relationship. You know, how do the norms get formed? What sort of behaviour is acceptable, what's not? You know, is it okay to have 20 phone calls a day to find out where you are and who you're talking to? And no is the answer. You know, it's about thinking around what the motivation behind the behaviour is before you even get to the money stuff. And to make sure that our self-talk, women's self-talk, is around, is this what I want? Is this what I want in the long term? How do I protect my personal integrity and financial base? And what am I prepared to discuss away or agree to differently? But we need to have that conversation with ourselves first before we have it with someone else. And I think some sort of thought around, in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years' time, what do I want my life to be? And then you almost build backwards about, well, in order to have that, these are the things I need in place now.
Yeah, and planning for the worst, expecting for the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
If, say, if people are starting to move in together, they're starting to share bills, sign a lease, open a joint account, maybe even start thinking about saving for really big expenses like a car or a home, what are they really agreeing to, whether they realise it or not?
They're usually not agreeing to much in a voluntary informed capacity. You know, someone will have a credit card or get a credit card and there'll be a second card off that, but not understanding the financial and legal obligations that sit with it. When we buy a car together or when we buy a home together, you know, how that contract's structured is really important. And most people buy as joint owners. Some younger people are now buying as tenants in common, which mean that if we have a house together and I conk out, my half can be willed to whoever I want it to be. Now, that might create a problem for you if I leave my half to someone who you might not get on with or don't think that's appropriate. But they're the discussions that need to happen. It's about how do we protect ourselves, but how do we protect each other? It's not always a one-way street. It's about being really clear about what it is that we've agreed to and understanding what the ramifications are.
Yeah, can we dive in, because I love to do a bit of nerd alert and into what some of these terms are that we are agreeing to that we might not understand. And I've had a lot of conversations with people about, so this contract could be joint and several liability. Do you know what that means? And most people think it means, oh, it's a 50-50 loan. Tell me, what is joint and several liability, and tell me some other areas that we should be looking for as well and understanding what is that legal construct.
Yeah. If someone has a contract that's where it's jointly and severally liable, it means that if they can't get the money from me, they'll get it from you. So that if I'm out of the picture, 100% of that debt will come to you and you'll be pursued for that.
So if someone was going to take that next step in a relationship, they're about to make a big financial decision with a partner, what would be the key questions that they should ask then, or that they could ask to get that clarity and to be clear, and then align that with where they want to go in that long term?
If I was seeking a loan now, I'd be asking about, if things don't turn out as I want, how will you support me? Do you have flexibility to give me additional time if I need it? What sort of financial risk am I being exposed to? And where are my legal protections?
They're very simple, straightforward questions.
Yep.
And you should be able to ask that of anyone.
Yep.
Any provider, and hopefully get the answers that you need to help you make that really big decision. What about then if life doesn't go as planned, because relationships might change, circumstances might change, what then would you say to people about understanding their options if they need to adjust things later? So they've asked the questions up front. Now life didn't quite go the way they thought it would go.
Yep.
What happens next?
I think part of that discussion is based on how you organise your finances at the beginning, and you don't commit all of your money to a particular pool, that you need your own money to make your own decisions for the things that are important to you. And you have a shared agreement about what this accounts for, and it probably might be a mortgage or debt that you equally contribute to. So it's about building some of that structure into how you do that. And the other side of that is the other party probably has their own account that they can make their own decisions about. I mean, as soon as things start to go pear-shaped, it's always around, for me, having a conversation with who the lender is, regardless of the product, to explore what the issues are individually and collectively.
And how much easier would it be for people if they understood how to set up from the beginning if they did need to disentangle or rebuild, make some really tough calls?
I think all of those decisions need to be made when they don't need to, you know, with a cool head and a calm heart, effectively. And in the sign-up process of a home, for example, there should be a conversation around, if the relationship doesn't continue, how will you deal with joint property? and have that really cleared and agreed and hope that you don't need it. If you're purchasing a car jointly, having the conversation about, again, if our relationship doesn't continue, as a couple, they've probably contributed to that loan, but only one person will drive away in it. To have those key financial decisions settled as much as you can before you have to.
Yeah.
And what that does is it helps preserve, it's not people's integrity, but they know that they've given it consideration. They know how it's going to fall because it's been previously agreed, and they know where they can start to move forward rather than the crisis that it will create and not knowing where to turn at a time that they can't think it through.
Yeah. And presumably checking in as well over time.
Yeah.
Has that changed for us?
Yeah.
Too? So for someone who's not been familiar with any of this, what would be one small thing they could do this week after listening to this episode that might give them a bit more clarity or control over their money or their bills and their circumstances?
I think there's a few things they can do. One is to, if the household isn't in crisis, start those conversations as soon as they can in a really level. We want something that's going to work together for both of us. We want something that can protect both of us if the outcome's not what we look to. To do things like superannuation, make sure that the beneficiary are who you want, to see who your second contact is on essential services. All of the things that are in play that we don't often think about. To start to behave and think about being financially independent, and what does that mean? Because for a lot of people, they might not have had that experience ever. And again, that's about talking to your bank, talking to your friends, getting professional advice if you need it, seeing a financial counsellor who's free, just to get the information to help inform you about how do you step forward. But one of the things that it used to shock me is people's negative self-talk. And they'd be, they'd say something, I make really bad decisions and it always goes to shit. And, I just can't trust myself because of whatever. And then they'll go into, I was just so stupid. Why did I do that? And to get them to stop and say, the fact that you hear you've made some amazing decisions and you've shown such strength, maybe you should be saying to yourself how talented you are and how strong you are, because that's what I see, and start to feed in a different self-talk. And although it's only a small thing, it's so important for people.
My takeaway from Simone and Sue: the shared financial life you fall into at the beginning of a relationship might be too boring to think about, but the admin shapes the options you have later. So before you set up shared bills and accounts, do this. Map every household account by name: utilities, internet, phones, streaming. For everyone whose name is on it, that person has the structural power, and that means the permission to change, cancel, or lock others out of it. So if your name isn't on it, that's a decision, not a default. Make it one. Keep your phone in your own name. There are real financial benefits to bundling plans, but whoever holds the account holds the records, including the ones you might need one day. Your phone account is yours. Keep it that way. Check your secondary contact status. On every utility account, check whether you're listed as a secondary contact. That sounds like protection, and it may be, but it could also be legal exposure. Ask the provider what a secondary contact can and can't do, and what happens if the primary account holder changes or disputes a bill. Understand what you're signing before you sign it. Joint does not mean 50-50. Joint and several liability means each of you is responsible for all of it. So before you co-sign anything, a lease, a loan, an energy bill, ask one question. If they can't or won't pay, what happens to me? Make the big decisions before you need to. What happens to the lease if you split up? Who drives away in the jointly financed car? These conversations are much easier to have before they're urgent. A cool head and a calm heart, they're Sue Fraser's words, is the right moment to make them. because love shouldn't cost you freedom.